Welcome to Four Player Podcast's Audible Impressions. I'm Jeffrey DeMello, an editor at 4playerpodcast.com, and with me, fellow editor George Dennison, to talk about XBLA Summer of Arcade smash hit Deadlight. What's up, George?
Hey, how's it going?
So you've read my review on the site?
Yep.
And you agree with my opinions?
I agree with all of your opinions, yes.
Okay, so with that said, I think we're going to do this Audible impression a little bit different, and we're going to start off on the negative notes, and I'm going to let you take the mic and rant a little bit, and I'll comment, because my opinions are there.
Right, where do I start? I think we both agree that one of the central problems with Deadlight is the clunky controls.
Yes.
So, it's a 2D platformer. It's similar to sort of Shadow Complex and Limbo. It's 2.5D, I think they call it.
Yeah.
And the controls, I mean, if you're expecting something of the caliber of Limbo, you're going to be bitterly disappointed, because the controls in particular just they're not conducive to that kind of fluid experience. And I think you can attest to the fact that those controls basically cause a lot of moments of extreme frustration.
Yeah, right.
Particularly in the second half of the game.
And it's just this robotic approach to controls that later in the game, when they ask you to, climb four things back to back perfectly, or you get shot by a helicopter, it doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, comparing it to Limbo, I mean, Limbo was kind of, I think even the developers played it, described it as a trial by death game, and they deliberately made the deaths entertaining because they wanted you to experiment with the puzzles to make sure that you weren't afraid to sort of, throw yourself in the face of danger to see what would happen. Whereas with this, you get a whole load of loading screens every time that you mess up, and that it's not the same fluid experience. I mean, I think the word fluid is going to keep coming back here, because it's a game that looks like it's trying to be a very fluid experience, like fluid animation, but then it doesn't have the controls or the snappy fluidity of something like Limbo or Super Meat Boy to make it sort of consistent, if you know what I mean.
Right.
The actual gameplay isn't particularly innovative in any way. I mean, the puzzles are pretty bog standard. Pull this block, push this switch, turn this valve, sort of thing, and you're gonna feel like you've seen it all before. Right.
It's a bad thing when the frustrations in a puzzle platformer or puzzle action platformer comes more from not being able to do something the controls are asking, instead of not being able to figure out how to solve that puzzle. Because all the puzzles are it's barely puzzles, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kind of sad. I don't necessarily know that that's what they were aiming for. That's kind of what I was hoping to get out of this, a little bit more, head-scratching puzzles, but I didn't get any of it. And I didn't get a lot of action either, so I don't know really what they were trying to do.
I mean, it seems that they wanted it to be very streamlined and very linear, because, I mean, if you notice that all of the climbable ledges have a tiny little arrow that points you to where you can grab onto things.
Yeah.
And, a game like Limbo didn't feel like it had to do that. The level design was intuitive enough to make you feel like you knew exactly where, if you're going to make a jump, you knew whether you were going to make it, whether you weren't going to make it. Whereas here, they feel like they have to really signpost that for you. And even then, you can sometimes think that you're going to make a jump, feel like you've timed it perfectly, and still fall off into a bit of shallow water and die or something like that, which is where a lot of the frustration comes from.
Let's move on to the good stuff. Let's step back for a second and think about the people that maybe can look past all the gripes that we kind of have with it.
Yeah, well, if you can do that, there are a couple of things that it does quite well. I mean, the most obvious thing, I guess, are the visuals, which are, to its credit, very, very polished.
Yes.
For an XBLA game. And it, as I said earlier, the animation is very fluid. you can see all these little effects in the background. It's a 2.5D game, and it does use that to its best advantage. And then some of the background sort of does give this. It would be atmospheric if it didn't constantly pull you out of the atmosphere, but I mean, when it's at its best, it does kind of draw you into this quite atmospheric post-apocalyptic world. And I think a lot of what kills that is the narration, which is very Solid Snake in its gravelly voice, sort of gruff delivery. And he often sort of vocally sort of says the things that the player is supposed to be experiencing for themselves. I mean, I hope I'm not sort of hammering on about this too much, but I am going to compare it to Limbo again, because I think it sort of invites it. But there's the bit in Limbo where the spider comes along, and kid's not going, "Oh my god, there's a spider, there's a spider." You know, you feel that yourself, and the game doesn't have to spell that out for you. It just invokes those emotions. Whereas in Deadlight, there are bits where like the zombies come along, and the guy you're playing as sort of actually says out loud, "Oh my god, run away from the zombies," sort of thing. And I found that really grating when it happened.
They did it with the helicopter too. It's like, "Oh shit, the helicopter! Yeah, exactly. Run as fast as you can." It's a bit silly.
And I think the story in general is just sort of, as you say, it's extremely cliche, like cliche to the point almost of absurdity, right from the very start. And yeah, I do kind of like those comic book style little cutscenes, but as you say, like it kind of, it's almost in this awkward state where, as you say, it's not quite over the top enough to be over the top, but then it's not. Just can't take it seriously. Like, it's not well written enough to be taken seriously, which just makes it, to move on to another point, which makes it all the more of a shame that you have this diary, which is actually quite well written as part of a sort of a collectible thing going on, where you collect these diary entries, and they're actually quite well written and compelling. And if you were just to have that diary entry as a sort of a short story, you'd have a pretty decent post-apocalyptic short story, I think.
Right, yeah, the diary was something that I excluded bringing up in my review, but it was one of the cool things that when I came to it, I was like, I started reading, I flipped to the first page, you know what I mean? And you find pages, which is weird, you know, they use that as a crutch to have, you know, collectibles in the games. Like, oh, you found a journal entry that magically got ripped out and landed here in your world. But I did like that. It did flesh the story out better than anything they tried to do visually or narratively in the game outside of the menu. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
That was cool. And I did like the collectible stuff because there was a lot of cool, interesting things, but again, they didn't flesh that out enough. You know, like, oh, I found this ID for this guy. But who is he? He's nobody. But maybe later, if I had found a news clipping and that guy's name was in it, that would have made that so much more interesting. You know what I mean? If they had just taken the time to really think out their collectibles and give them a reason to flesh out the universe.
Which is a real shame, because as you say, you pick these things up and they have this certain level of intrigue. It's obvious that they put a certain level of research into these things. I kind of like the underlying survival horror mechanics in principle, but they don't work in the context of the game, which is, as you say, trying to fight off 8 zombies while also trying to grapple your way onto a ladder, all jump off onto another piece of rubble, and then, you know, pull a switch or something. It just becomes far too frustrating. And then, as you say, you get the gun, and then getting headshots is piss easy. So it just sort of, and there's not. I didn't really get the sense that you were limited in bullets. You get as much bullets as you need, really, and then
right.
So it sort of negates the challenge.
That goes back to the pacing issues that I had with it, right? Like, I was running from zombies all this time, avoiding any type of combat that I could, because all I had was this axe, and if there was more than one zombie in a room, which there typically was, I wasn't fending them off because it was such a pain in the ass to knock them back. So I was just completely avoiding them at all costs, you know, redirecting them with the whistle, and all that. and then, and then you get to a section where it's like they stick you in a room with a body with unlimited ammo on it and 30 zombies run in, and it's like, why are we even doing this? Has nothing, no part of the game before this was leading me to this. You didn't train me for this, you know what I mean? You didn't get me ready for this at all. You just dropped 30 zombies on my lap, and like, was that supposed to be some type of like puzzle? Because the only thing that I was puzzled at was why this was happening, because there was no need for it previously, and they never foreshadowed that type of gameplay, pace coming through, so.
But I mean, it's a shame because just to go back to one of the things I actually liked about the game was that it used that 2.5D thing quite well, in that you can see the zombies coming from the background into the foreground, and that is really effective because you can see them and you're not really sure if they're aware of your presence, and then you run by, you see them sort of start to come towards you, and that can actually be quite intense. So. Right.
They're not zombies; they're shadows.
Exactly. Yeah, they're not zombies. They're quote unquote shadows.
And God only knows what Deadlight means. Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks for listening, everyone. Keep it on the website, 4playerpodcast.com. We stream video games every night at 4pp.tv/live. Also Twitter at 4playerpodcast. George, do you have a Twitter?
I do have a Twitter. It's at Denisaur1.
Denisaur.
Yeah, DENISAUR1.
There it is, and I am Quality...
Like dinosaur.
Right, but Dennis.
But, yeah.
And I am at Quality Beats 84. I hope you enjoyed this little discussion, and keep it here at 4playerpodcast.com. Till next time, thanks, George.
That's...